Cell transport, AQA Biology. Just to let you know, I'm so sorry if you can hear music playing in the background. Family doesn't care that I'm recording. Key terms. Partially permeable means that it lets some molecules through via processes such as osmosis, diffusion, and active transport. Integral slash transmembrane protein. It's involved in moving particles along the membrane via ion pores or channel proteins or actively. Peripheral protein. This may help to anchor other proteins in the membrane. Intrinsic and extrinsic proteins float in the bilayer. They move around the bilayer but don't swap in between the layers. Structure of the cell surface membrane, sorry. Well, you have a plasma membrane that surrounds the cell, and it forms a boundary between the cytoplasm and the environment. It controls the movement of substances in and out of the cell. And this is what it looks like. So you have the intrinsic or peripheral proteins, you have the channel proteins, and you have carrier proteins and such. Now, this is a picture you've seen before, which is a picture of a phospholipid. Now, a phospholipid has a phosphate group, a phosphodiester bond, glycerol, an ester bond, and a fatty acid chains. The structure of the membrane is a fluid mosaic structure in which it's known as this, which is also a point that might come up in your exam, because the membrane is fluid and allows proteins to move along the membrane. The proteins also have different shapes and sizes, which looks a bit like a mosaic the way it fits all together. The different type of carrier proteins. You have carrier proteins which are passive and require no energy for things to diffuse through, You have gated channel proteins, which can be active and work a bit like, I don't know if you lot are young enough to remember, but do you remember Pac-Man? Where it opened its mouth, and then you need energy to close its mouth, and then it opens out at the bottom, letting the substance through. Then channel protein, which allows the diffusion of small molecules such as ions, and a carrier protein which is active and requires energy such as ATP in order for it to work. Now, what are the different methods of transport across the membrane? You have diffusion, facilitated diffusion, osmosis, active transport, endocytosis, and exocytosis. Now, some examples of integral proteins are enzymes, proteins involved in energy transfers, and supportive structures. How does the phospholipid bilayer work? Well, there's liquid around the bilayer, and it has a hydrophilic head and a hydrophilic tail. The hydrophilic head is water-loving, the hydrophobic tail is water-hating. That's the way how I remember it. Think of phobic as in you have a phobia, you want to get away from it. And it aligns the head on the both ends, and the two layers that form inside and outside are both aqueous. Factors of the cell membrane. Well, you have factors that affect the permeability of the cell membrane, such as heat, ethanol, and the pH, because if it gets too hot, then the proteins start to move more. And then because there are proteins in there, the proteins will start to denature. If they denature, that means you have gaps in the membrane and things start to leak through. With the pH, as we already know in the previous videos, things such as enzymes are pH sensitive. So too high of a pH or too low of a pH can also cause the enzymes to denature. It determines what substances pass through, such as lipid-soluble substances and ions, and this is just a pH scale. Some molecules don't diffuse freely, as some molecules are just too big to diffuse through the phospholipid bilayer. Not all of the molecules are lipid soluble, so they can't exactly get through a lipid membrane, and some of them are the same charge. If you're the same charge as something, you're going to repel. Function of proteins in the membrane. Well, they provide structural support and act as a channel transporting water-soluble substances across the membrane. They allow active transport through carrier proteins and form cell surface receptors for identifying cells. They help cells adhere together, which means stick, and they act as receptors. Function of cholesterol. Well, cholesterol is able to pull fatty acids or phospholipids together, which limits movement without making the cell membrane too rigid. It reduces the lateral movement of other molecules and makes the membrane less fluid at higher temperatures. It also prevents the leakages of water and dissolved ions from the cell and helps to add strength. Glycolipids. They are made up from carbohydrates and covalently bonded with the lipid. They act as cell surface receptors for specific chemicals and maintain the strong stability of the cell. They also help cells to attach to each other and form tissue. Glycoproteins. Glycoproteins are carbohydrate chains attached to many extensive proteins. They help cells attach to each other and form tissue and allow cell recognition. Now, thank you for listening to this video. And the next video will be about actually how things are transported across the membrane, such as osmosis, diffusion, and all of that. Thank you for listening. If you like the video, then please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. And I'll see you on the next one.